Welcome to HoustonRCRacers Garage. In this video, I'll be doing a build review on the Team Associated B7. So let's get started. So I've been running the B7 for some time now. Finished the build probably a few weeks ago. I want to say I have about 20 packs through the car now. Not much practice time, maybe 3 packs of practice, but most of the packs have been club racing or our series race at Houston RC. So been enjoying it so far. It's been a great buggy. So let's go ahead and dive into the build review. So for bag 1, the only thing that I noticed, so down here we have the collar for the anti-roll bars. And there was some flashing around where the anti-roll bar collar goes. So I recommend just cleaning up that flashing so that way there's no binding on that collar. Other than that, on bag 1, I didn't have any issues. I would recommend getting the aluminum bell cranks. They're finally back in stock now. So I know Houston RC has like 3 sets of them, so if you can't find them, message Houston RC and they'll have those. Bag 2, my control arms, that was mounting the front control arms, and mine were binding when they were installed. So what I did was I had to push them forward and then tighten up the little set screws, and that pretty much solved my binding issue. I'm sure if you ran a few packs through it like that, it would loosen up, but that's the one thing I did, and it seems to be working fine and no issues. I did notice bag 2, the plastic quality of the arms is so much nicer, and even after so many packs, everything is still nice and like the arms are still nice and tight on the hinge pins and move nice and free. Bag 3, I had 2 1mm ball head washers left over. I think they might be for the bump steer washers on the steering link right here. In the instructions, it doesn't say to use them, but if you look on the kit setup sheet in the back, it says that there's a 1mm spacer there. I never added it in. I can't tell that the buggy's acting funny or anything like that. It's awesome as it is, so I left them out. I didn't see a lot of slop in the caster and steering blocks, and there still really isn't much slop there. Much better than their previous cars. Bag 4, make sure when you install the pills, you install them in the correct orientation, and the C and D block. So just be patient, make sure that the dots are facing in the correct orientation. So bag 5 was the differential. Be careful when you tighten up the diff cover, and also tighten in a crisscross pattern, so that way the gasket sees even pressure, and don't over tighten it because the walls on the diff cup are very thin. So I think if you over tighten it, you could either strip it out or you can actually crack the diff cup, and then it's ruined at that point and you'd have to get a new one. I'm hoping one of the aftermarket companies comes out with like an all aluminum differential. Hopefully Drag Race Concepts, I think I ran their diff in my B64 and it was absolutely awesome. So hoping they come out with something like that for this car, and I'll probably end up getting it. Bag 6 was the gearbox. So make sure that every time you put the gearbox screws, the halves together, that you make sure everything moves nice and free. Every time you add a screw into the gearbox, make sure you spin the gearbox, make sure it's nice and free. And then what I like to do is, like, if I feel that it's tight, I'll just back off like maybe a 1/16 of a turn or 1/8 of a turn once it is fully tight, just to keep it kind of loose and so nothing binds up. The one thing I did notice that the manual did not have is that these two screws here on these two screws here are M3 by 24 screws, and they actually thread into the ball stud mount, which is aluminum. So I added some blue Loctite to that, so that way these don't come loose, since they do see impact and stuff like that, since it has to do with the suspension. One thing to note, some people were having issues with the C-block. So this is the C-block right here. So I know online some people were saying that they were having issues with the hinge pins ripping out of the C-block because the hinge pin is kind of short and doesn't fully engage the pills in the front and the rear. One solution was to flip the C-mount, and then instead of using a 2mm spacer, use a 1mm spacer. But my solution was to, like, I did have a short hinge pin, and what I did was I just removed the control arm. I installed everything, and I could notice that the hinge pin was moving front to back. And if the hinge pin is, like, if you hit something and the hinge pin isn't in the front, it's gonna rip out. Especially since if you see here, there's room for the aluminum doesn't fully capture on this piece right here, so it'll just rip out and ruin your C-block and your pill. So my solution was this. I took a sprue and I just cut a small piece, and then I put that small piece inside the pill in the D-block, and I cut a small piece, put it in the D-block, then I would assemble this and see if the holes lined up. And then I would take a hobby knife, and I would just take a little sliver off that little sprue piece that I cut until I could see the holes line up. And then I went ahead and installed everything. And so far it's been good. I haven't had any issues. I haven't had like a really bad crash, but it's been good so far, and that could possibly be a solution. I think Associated is working on a longer hinge pin for their second batch, but if you have the first batch or the second batch, just check, and hopefully this will solve that problem. All right, bag 7 was to install the rear hubs, and there is a set screw that holds the rear hub insert in place. So there's these two set screws here that hold that rear hub insert in place. And my recommendation is to not tighten that up until you're done with step 7. Just because if you tighten it too much, it compresses that rear hub insert, and it prevents that hinge pin from going through all the way. And also, I noticed that if you over tighten this lock nut on the hinge pin itself, it'll compress the control arm a little bit and cause the rear hub to bind. So just make sure that there's like a small gap and you can move that hinge pin back and forth just a little bit. Bag 8 was the turnbuckles. They went together very easily. I feel like they don't have much slop. They don't bind at all. I think the quality is much better than the B6.4 and the B74.2. So no issues there. Bag 9, no issues, but it was interesting to see their shock package compared to their previous cars. They're including their 2.5mm thick pistons in the kits. I believe the new B74.2 Champions Edition, I think is what they're calling it, that was just released, also has 2.5mm pistons. I have those in my B74.2 and they're a game changer, so it was good to see that they included that in the kit, because that was an option part for the B6.4, and the buggy just lands so well. So bag 10, make sure to use the correct thumb screws when you install these, because there's a standard size which is meant for like a thicker battery pack, and then there's a low profile thumb screw for low profile packs. So if you're running like a 4800 or a 5000, I think the low profile one works fairly well. I'm running a 4400. It's a new battery that ProTech, I guess, just came out with. And I had to actually take a Dremel and Dremel the bottom a little bit, just so that way it would actually hold the battery in place. The only issue I've had is that this piece is kind of weak, and I guess I took a hard hit when I crashed and this piece broke. So I'm actually using the half offset one, still kind of in the stock position, but just half offset forward. Haven't noticed any issues driving. I can't tell a difference, so it's been pretty good so far. The only thing that I have done tuning wise to the car is change the rear diff fluid. I found that the 30K is way too high, and so off power steering, it just goes wide. There's no off power steering, but with that 30K, it's a great like point and shoot car, but not a car that you'd be able to drive smoothly around the corners and things like that, if that's your style of driving. But it would make a good point and shoot car. It might be good for mod, but running 17.5 stock class, and I just don't seem to like it that much. Right now I'm running 20K, and I think like 15 to 20K might be good for 17.5. Not so much like a tight track, where a tight track might work depending on your driving style. If you're running a 21.5 class, I probably recommend like a 5 to 10K in the diff. That way, like, you have that off power steering, and since your motor isn't too powerful, that light diff fluid would work very well. So that's pretty much it for the build review. I really enjoyed building it. Like I said, the quality is much better than their previous kits. It was very surprising and very enjoyable to see the fit and finish as I was building the car itself. The car drives amazing. The parts support is amazing. Our local hobby shop has a bunch of arms, towers, rod ends, etc. that you'd probably ever need if you were to break something on the car. So it's nice to see that those came, the hobby shop ordered those the same day that they ordered the kits, so they all came at one time. So I would highly recommend the kit. It's probably one of the faster ones out there. I think, honestly, like, I'm not sponsored. I bought the kit out of my own money. I don't think you could go wrong with the LD3 or the X-Ray. They're both great cars. I'd highly recommend the car. I think it had multiple podiums on our series race in our 21.5 class and in our 17.5 class. It's been doing really well club racing as well in our 21.5 class and our 17.5 class. With the way my car sits right now, it didn't meet like kit setup with the stock spec ESC. and the 4400, I had to add some weight. I added a 5 gram weight, and I believe I have a 34 gram weight underneath the battery as well. The only upgrades I have on my car are the bell cranks, and then I have Kashima shocks. I would highly recommend the Kashima shocks for an intermediate driver. I would drive the stock shocks and then put the Kashima shocks on, because I feel like they are just a tad bit smoother and make your buggy a little bit more forgiving to drive. You're able to pitch it and land sideways a little bit more than you would be able to with the stock shocks, and that's gonna be able to make you as a driver be a little bit more consistent if you normally would have traction rolled if you landed sideways, and you're able to push the car a little bit more and gain some time by landing sideways, coming out of a jump, going onto a straight. So I would highly recommend the Kashima shocks. I think at this point all my associated vehicles have Kashimas, and that's the first upgrade performance wise that, you know, to get the most out of your car, I would highly recommend. But I think an intermediate driver would be able to notice that change. A beginner driver, I don't think as much, but an experienced driver as well would definitely notice the change in performance by going to the Kashimas. So I know there's a few guys at our local club that swear by them. I know I'm one of them, so I definitely highly recommend that. But that's it for the build review. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the build series. I know I did. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.